The Princess of Florence, how to set up and play. First thing you'll do is lay out your building tiles. You have your large buildings that occupy 7 squares, your medium buildings that occupy 5 squares, and your small buildings that occupy 3 squares. Shuffle the deck of profession cards and bonus cards. Set out the main game board. Put the round tracker on round 1. The game will take place over 7 rounds. All players will get a token on the 0 spot. Set out the supply of money or florins, and then set out the freedoms: travel, opinion, and religion. You'll always put a freedom for 1 less than the player count. So if this was a 3-player game, you would have 2 for each of these. I'm setting this up for a 2-player game. In a 2-player game, you'll put 2 of each and then randomly remove 1. Next, you have your 7 auction items. These are the landscape tiles. You have forests, lakes, and parks. You have your jesters and your builders. Shuffle the deck of prestige cards and set out the recruiting cards. Each player will get their own board and a disc that you can put on their palazzo building. Each player is going to draw 4 profession cards, decide which 3 they want to keep, and return the one they want to discard. Once all players have returned their 1 profession card that they don't want to keep, reshuffle the deck. All players will start with 3,500 florins. Again, I'm setting this up for a 2-player. In a 2-player game, you only use 2,500 florins per player to start, and then finally randomly select a start player and give them that token. Each round is separated into an auction phase and an action phase. In the auction phase, the start player will select one of the 7 items to put up for auction, and by doing that, they're putting the starting bid, which is always 200 florins. Then we go clockwise. Each player can pass, which means they'll drop out of the auction for that item, or they can raise the bid. The raise has to always be in increments of 100 florins. So you'll continue to go around until the highest bid is the only one remaining, and they'll win the item. When that happens, you will pay the money to the bank and mark the item that was won, making it off limits for the rest of this auction phase. The start player is always the starting bidder until he or she wins an auction or drops out. If that happens, you simply go clockwise, and the next player would be the one to start the auction until everyone has had a chance to win an item or drop out of an auction completely. Once there's only 1 player remaining that has not received an item, they can select any of the remaining items. Remember, once an item has been won, it's off limits for that auction round, but they can select one of the available items, and they only have to pay the minimum of the 200 florins to the bank. So you continue until every player has either won an auction or chosen not to buy an item, because a starting bidder who does not name an item drops out of all bidding and will get nothing. So maybe they're choosing not to bid on an item, or maybe they don't have the money for the starting bid. Finally, for a 2-player game, the starting bid is 300 instead of 200, but you still go up in 100 florin increments to raise bids. The other rule change for a 2-player game is the starting bidder can put up the landscape tiles up for auction instead of picking one individually. So they'll put up the landscape tiles, you'll do the round robin, and the winner will have their choice of the 3. But once that choice is made, all the landscape tiles are off limits for this auction round in a 2-player game. So now let's cover what happens when you win each of the 7 items during the auction. The landscape tiles simply go immediately into your board. They can be adjacent to anything as long as they're within the bounds. They will increase the work value for your professions, and we'll see that later. Also, keep in mind that whenever you add the same landscape type you immediately get 3 prestige points. So in a subsequent auction, if this player was able to get another forest and add it anywhere to their board, that would be an immediate 3 prestige points. Next are Jesters. When you win a Jester token, simply put it into your Palazzo building. Jesters are going to increase your work value by 2 points for each Jester. Next is the Builder. Simply take the Builder tile and add it to your board. When you take your first Builder, it goes there, second Builder, and third Builder. Your builders will help you when building buildings. And another thing to keep in mind, when you add your second or your third builder, immediately get 3 prestige points. Next are the prestige cards. When you win this auction, you're going to draw 5 off the top of the deck, decide which one you want to keep, and then take the other 4 and put them at the bottom of the deck in any order you choose. Prestige cards are going to provide end of game prestige points. And finally, the recruiting cards. When you win this auction, you can see right here, may be traded for any face-up profession card on the table, and then it will count as a profession card when counting the work value for bonus and prestige cards. So if you were to win this auction, you can take one of these cards, you can see they're all the same, and simply add it to your hand. These can be used whenever you choose, including immediately. When you decide to use it, again, it'll have to be for another player's face-up profession card. You would take their card, this would become a placeholder for them, and then you would take this into your profession hand. At the end of the auction phase, we'll move to the action phase. Each player will get 2 actions that they can take in any combination. We'll start with the start player. They'll take their 2 actions, and then we'll move clockwise around the table until all players have taken their 2 actions. You can see these are the 5 to choose from. 2 of them, the freedom and the profession card action, can only be taken once during the action phase, where the other 3 could be taken twice if the players choose to. First, let's start with the freedom action. You pay 300 florins to the bank. You take one of the available freedoms and simply add it to your principality board. You can ever only have one of each freedom throughout the game. Next is the profession card action. Pay 300 florins to the bank. You get to draw the top 5 cards off the profession deck. You choose 1 to keep, and then the other 4 you place at the bottom of the deck in any order you choose. Next is the bonus card action. It works the same way. You'll pay 300 florins to the bank. You'll draw the top 5 bonus cards from the top of the deck, decide which one to choose, take the other 4, and place them at the bottom of the deck. Next is the building action. You pay 700 florins to the bank. You take one of the available building types and add it to your board. It's important to remember that whenever anything gets placed on your board, whether it's a landscape or a building, it can never be moved. So make careful consideration when placing. Also, for buildings, they cannot have any sides touching other buildings. So you couldn't place that there because the sides would be touching. Landscapes can be adjacent to anything, and buildings can be adjacent to other landscapes. So that would be fine. You could scoot that in there. Also, buildings can have corners touching because the side isn't touching, so only sides are not allowed to touch. Also, builders will help you when taking the building action. You can see that when you have your first builder, all your buildings only cost 300 instead of 700. If you had your second builder, now you can have adjacent buildings. So if this player had a second builder, when they took that building action, then it's okay for them to have buildings having sides touching. And then finally, the third builder, you can see your building action. Once you get this third builder, your buildings cost 0 instead of the usual cost. Some final points. As we discussed, you can never move or even demolish, remove buildings. Once they're placed, it's permanent. Whenever you build a building, you can see you get 3 prestige points immediately. Also, you can ever only build 1 of each type of building on your principality board. And the final action you can take is the works action. To create a work, you're going to play a profession card from your hand, and you're going to determine the work value associated with that profession based on matching attributes that this profession prefers. It's important to remember that the work value, when you create a work, has to meet or exceed the work value associated with the round. So in round 1, whenever you create a work, it has to at least be 7 or higher. In this example, we're in round 6. So any work that you create has to have a work value of 16 or higher. So let's go through this example to demonstrate how a work value is calculated. We can see that we have the chapel building, so we're going to get those 4 points added to our work value. We have a forest. It doesn't matter that we have multiple, but we do have a forest, so we'll get those 3 points. We do not have the freedom of opinion, so we're not going to get those work value points. We do have jesters. You can see for each jester, you get 2 additional work value points. We have 2, so that's going to add 4 to this card. And then you count your profession cards, including this one. So we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 profession cards. We're going to add 4 work value points. And you can see that's where the recruiting card came into play. So earlier in the game, these were obviously face-up professions that were played prior. Another player took that profession from them and replaced it with this recruiting card. So this served as a placeholder and now counts towards the profession card bonus. So let's add up all of our work value points so far. We can see the chapel gave us 4, the forest gave us 3, our 2 jesters gave us 4. We had 4 profession cards, including this one, so that gave us 4 points. We're also allowed to play bonus cards when creating a work. So we have 2 bonus cards in our hand. Let's decide to play that one. We can see that for each building in our principality, we get to add 1. So we have 2 buildings in our principality. The pre-printed palazzo doesn't count for this bonus. So that adds on another 2 work value points. And then let's play this bonus card. For each landscape type, forest, lakes, or parks, we get to add 2 work value points. Well, we know we have 2 landscape types, forests and lakes, so that's an additional 4. So summing all those together gives this a work value of 21. So what you're going to do is take your marker and place it right here to indicate that you've created a work value of 21. Now you've got to make a decision. You can take 21 times 100 for 2,100 florins, but now you have the option of turning in some of that money, and only that money, into victory points at a ratio of 200 to 1. So you may decide, you know what, I have 2,100 florins, I'm going to turn in 2,000 of those florins to get 10 victory points, and I'm going to keep the leftover 100 florins and take that from the bank. So after you've chosen how many of your florins you want to convert to victory points, your profession card just goes with your other face-up profession cards. Any bonus cards you played get discarded and removed from the game. You've moved up your score tracker based on the victory points you've cashed in, and you've collected any remaining florins that you decided to retain. One important thing to remember is that when creating a work, you marked the work value of that work. Any victory points that you turned in, you use this marker to move up the prestige point track. This is going to stay because at the end of the round, we're going to see who created the greatest work that round. And that player is going to earn 3 prestige points at the end of the round. Now, if you create 2 works in the same round, you're only marking the value of the higher work. And then once we've determined who created the highest work that round, we can return these markers. If there's a tie, both players, or all tied players, will receive the 3 victory points. So there's a recap of what we just covered. After a work, you can convert 200 florins for a victory point, and then at the end of the round, the best work would get the 3 additional prestige points. Once we've finished the round and all players have taken their actions, we'll advance the round marker and we'll pass the start player clockwise. Once you finish the 7th and final round, all that's left to do is score prestige cards. These points are possible for the player that possesses the card and would be added to your current prestige point total. You can see in this card, if you had all 3 landscape types, forests, lakes, and parks, you would earn 8 prestige points. So let's say by the end of the game, this player was able to get all 3 landscape types, they would get 8 prestige points. This card, if you had the most builders, you would earn 6 prestige points. So you would count your builders up, and if you were the most all by yourself, you would get 6. If you were tied for the most with another player, you would just get 3 prestige points. It's only the player possessing the cards that get to score these. After all players have scored any possible prestige card bonuses and added them to their prestige points, most prestige points wins the game. If there's a tie, most money will break the tie. One final thing to remember, at any time, players have the ability to drop on the prestige point track. For each point they give up, they can collect 100 florins from the bank. So that can help them if they need to purchase something or need additional money during an auction. They can do that at any time. And that should be everything you need to set up and play the Princes of Florence.